Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 45. I was able to meet up with Maryam Hariri in San Francisco during her tour releasing the Azizam wines. Maryam was a climate change policymaker before being a climate adaptive winemaker, and we talk about both lives. She also works with Beachy Wines, and Azizam is also based in Baja, California. She works mostly with small vineyards and old vines. Palomino, Mission, Rosa del Peru, and Nebbiolo make up much of the production. It's often fermented and aged in concrete tinajas, aka amphora. Here we go. How did you make the transition from more of a academic background to wine? Because you worked at Berkeley for a bit, right? And NYU?
I worked at NYU. I taught at NYU at the Food Studies Department and Environmental Studies Department, but I'm an urban planner. So I was doing sort of a combination of policy work and academic work for New York City, for FEMA, for different organizations. And it really, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, like it was a deep organic process. It was something that I never thought I would be able to do at this stage of my life. But in the whole time that I was doing this climate change work, traveling for different conferences and events and trainings, I would somehow carve time to also visit vineyards or go to wine fairs, or at a minimum go to wine shops and bars.
Okay.
Like if you're in London for a meeting, you're going to go to Braun,
Yeah.
Organize it that way. If you're going to be in New York, you're going to go to Wild Air. So it was like a true passion, but more like an obsession, like this inevitable thing that I couldn't help myself.
Okay.
Yeah. And being a good Persian immigrant, I sort of use the academic as a way to transition into wine. Again, not with this intention that like, oh, I'm going to make wine one day or immediately, but it was more like, oh, this feels like I love drinking. I love tasting. I love learning. Okay, like how do I was too good. I can't just get into. I can't just like dance. I gotta like study art form, something like that. Like, oh, well, there's this deep connection with climate change and wine. Like I do all this work around climate change and land use planning, climate change and agriculture and food systems. Like, boom, it's the next thing. So I started basically doing that. I don't even remember. I want to say like 2010, 2012, like pretty early on, thinking about the interconnections and sort of seeing the parallels between what I was doing in this climate world and what I was getting obsessed with in the wine world.
Were you working in Mexico at all, or what drew you to Mexico?
To Baja?
Yeah.
I wasn't directly working in Baja. I had certainly been in conversation with a lot of resilience planners in Mexico City around earthquakes, but nothing like, how do I want to say that? My visit to Mexico City really impacted me. And, there was a lot of buzz around like the culture and the vibe in Mexico City around natural wine. Like at that time, I felt like maybe this was 17 or something, 18. A lot of people were going there. Maybe it was like 15, 16 people were like really, all my friends were going there and like, oh, Mexico City, there's such a cool wine scene, And so when I was there for like these resilience interviews, I, of course, went and visited all the natural wine places. And that's when I really connected with Noel and Beachy, and we started talking about collaborating.
Awesome.
He invited me to NASA, one of the underground natural wine pop-up thingies that was happening.
Fun. Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, what's happening here? There's a warehouse. There's all these people. Like something about that felt like it was on the cusp. But yeah, I hadn't really connected it to Baja until I went and visited. And I was like, oh, this is like actual wine country here. And it's so beautiful and so unexpected. And, sort of connecting to it was, I guess, especially like these old vines, you know, these 100-year-old vines, these vineyards that have been around in so many ways with so many layers. Like human, when I say layers, what I mean is like human policy layers, like with prohibition, about how people planted even more vines and grapes there to do naughty things, you know?
Yeah. That area kind of thrived during the American Prohibition, right?
Yeah. And it's like that border is so interesting because it's like so much, and we're skipping around a little bit here, but so much of Baja's wine heritage is, and this is like that with every border, Slovenia and Italy, you know, like every border, it's intertwined, you know, you can't separate them. So it's like, if America's having prohibition, guess whose opportunity this is, you know, and if Mexico's having a drought, guess whose opportunity it is. Like, it's always like that. But that's the thing that's amazing about wine and making wine. It's like you get this visceral, concrete thing to ground all this other stuff that you're doing. So in a way, like thinking about the transition from climate change to wine, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of, there's like a deep through line between, you know, research and studies on like the impact of climate change on cities, land use planning, urban areas, and like agriculture, viticulture, winemaking. But I think the part that was even more interesting and exciting for me was like, after doing so many years of, even though it's cities and it's concrete, it's like, but still high level policy, to like a bottle where you could taste it. You could be like, this vintage is fucked up partly because of the fires. This vintage is fucked up or amazing partly because of the rains, you know? And it's like, and it's this thing that a lot of people relate to. It's not like a policy map. It's not a land use planning map. It's not, you know, it's not a document. It's like, let's sit here and talk about like what happens when you have an early frost and the first bud kills, you know, is killed by it. And now you have a second bud and, you know, like, here's what it tastes like. And that's why it's so different, you know?
Yeah, it's like a physical manifestation of climate change.
Yeah. And it gives people this way, like, I think that's what's like the clincher for me. It's like, it gives me this way to talk about the same things. And I haven't completely cracked the code, you know, I'm still in the process of like, I'm 2 years into Azizam. So it's like, you know, my solo project, but I'm 4 years with Beachy, but like, you know, almost 5, I guess. But it's sort of, there's something about, I don't know exactly how to say this, but there's something about having this concrete product that's so everyday and ordinary for most people. And let's recognize the privilege in that wine is still a luxury good, natural or otherwise, right? Like, come on.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone, but, and so it's this like, sort of like produce. It can be this everyday good or a luxury good that a lot of people access. It feels ordinary in some way. And there's this funny element of joy with it. Even if you're having a shitty breakup, even if you're having a shitty Tuesday, there's something about wine that has an element of like pleasure. Maybe that's the word, pleasure.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about climate change around a dinner table or over a glass of wine, and it somehow is a very different energetic than in a like neon lit basement or like, you know, 20th floor public agency, you know. It's like the way in which we engage are like, we're a little disarmed. We're a little bit more ourselves. It's just like, you're having dinner and you're talking about this shit. So it's like, that's the direction I want to take it. You know, I haven't fully cracked that code yet because I'm like still as a producer getting my legs, but I think that's exactly the potential, and that's where I want to take it.
Yeah, it's amazing. You can kind of link those things together. Like, you're in a unique spot. I don't think there's too many winemakers with the background in like the climate policy and the overall knowledge of climate change. So it's pretty awesome that you can kind of like bring it all together and then, yeah, hopefully unlock that code to be able to get like the message out in the way that you want to.
Totally. I mean, I don't know if, you know, it's not, there's so many people in this space, and we all bring, like, there's climate scientists, there's like, agronomists, all you need all these characters. But there is something about having that lens of like macro level policy at the federal and an international level of like, oh, this is how people are operating. And then like zooming it to a region of, wine region or a vineyard or a plot, and being like, oh yeah, like this lot is like fried because this and this has happened over the last 10 years. And, or we can't really grow this anymore because this side of the slope is. And so there's something really interesting about that. Like it becomes very material and specific. And again, I don't want to make it sound like, of course, cities are the same. You're looking at like Water Street in Wall Street in New York, and it's like, that's an actual street. It's right on the coast, and there's a bunch of policies around it, and you're building like so-and-so and such to protect that. And, it's very concrete and material, literally. But I think there is like a different visceral reaction with wine.
You have a lot of older vine vineyards in Baja. And I guess kind of like the old vine vineyards in California, they're kind of survivors. Like they've been around for a long time and have made it through like different policies, whether like real policies or just other farming or what have you.
Yeah.
But what do you think is important for people looking to have vineyards put in now to make them be able to withstand 100 years of time, like varieties or rootstock or soil? Like what do you think is important for somebody maybe looking to have a vineyard that has the longevity of some of those now?
Super good question. The first thing I thought of was this policy report we did about, like, this was before Sandy or maybe right after. It was like, there was like these three approaches. This is a roundabout way to answer it. But it's like, there was, let me see if I can remember. It was like, one was retreat, which was like to completely not like live in these regions anymore because flood risk, like the sea level rise combined with the extreme weather events, inevitably would cause a more frequent flooding risk.
Okay.
So, you're like, retreat, like, don't build here,
Yeah.
And then the other was adapt, build higher, like, design it to be more flexible, like, use different materials, move up, change the building code so that, like, the electric, equipment is generator shit's higher, right?
Okay.
And then what was the third one? It's crazy that I can't remember the third one. It'll come to me. But I got that visual when you asked me that because it's like, it's so place specific, right? When I think of like, let's say Baja, if we're thinking about new vineyards there, well, let's just name like 3 or 4 wine regions there, right? So we have Tecate, Valle de Guadalupe, Valle de Gruya, right? Those are just Ojos Negros, like 3 or 4 new regions. Tecate has water.
Okay.
It's on the mountain. It's got deeper pockets and sources of water. You have these oak trees, you have the mountains. Like the vineyards are old. These are the 70, 80, 90, 100-year-old vineyards of Palomino, Muscatel, Rosa del Peru, Mission. And for the most part, they do well. There's definitely a lot more that could be done in terms of supporting their nutrition level in the soil.
Okay.
But they have access to these deep water sources because they've been around for so long. So the question is like, you'd have to do analysis. Like, would those water sources still be available today if you started a vineyard there? Like, sort of, maybe, yeah, because, it's way less developed than Valle de Guadalupe. There's way less hotels and restaurants and all the tourism industry that's in Valle. But, it's still like Tecate is a major town. Like, it's still doing its thing. There's people living there. And so, like, how would it do? I don't know, right? We do have newer vineyards that are like 10, 15, 20 years, and they're doing pretty okay. They're doing fine, well. But, like, will they survive 100 years? Will they survive 50 years? You'd have to do a lot of analysis to get to that. and Valle de Gruya. Like, that's also an interesting region. It's, closer to Ensenada and like coastal in some ways and in many ways. And some of the oldest vineyards like have been planted there because of the work of like Santo Tomas, one of the first, vineyards in the region. And also some of the newest vineyards are there because it, again, wasn't really well known. So we work with Mission there that's quite young and, different sort of small producers. And then we also work with like muscatel producers that have been doing that for a long time. And so both exist. And then there's Valle de Guadalupe, right? Like, but essentially like, that's like pretty tapped out, you know? There's just so much activity there now. And there's a huge stressor on the water levels. So like, what would it mean to start a vineyard there in the context of like sales and marketing? And yeah, great. In the context of your network of other winemakers and having access to resources, amazing. In the context of like longevity, questionable.
Yeah.
So I think it depends. But also you're spot on, like varietals, right? So again, going back to the ones that have done really well, it's Mission, Palomino, Rosa del Peru, Muscatel, Garnacha, Carignan, These are like these old Spanish varietals that take heat well, you know?
Yeah.
They're fickle in their own way. Like Rosa del Peru is really difficult to work with, but it can be. But they've stood literally the test of time. So in that way, they're climate adaptive, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't need a lot of resources. They're not irrigated. There's not a lot of nutrients being added. There's protection against mildew sometimes. But yeah, I don't know if I even answered your question. I went in circles.
Yeah. No, I think you did. Something you just said at the end there, but so how are you or Beachy working with the farming of the vineyards there to sort of with climate change in mind?
Yeah. Again, haven't cracked the code. I wish I could say like, oh, we have this like amazing climate plan, or we're doing this like, 50-year strategic vision around the region. I think it's a conversation that is, here's my experience of it. So, other producers might have different experiences. Every single producer, every single winemaker you talk to, conventional or natural, at some point will speak to the effects of water, drought, and maybe this like crazy weather variability of when harvest starts and ends. So just to give a concrete example, in 22, the harvest started about 3 weeks early. Typically harvest in Baja is September, similar to California.
Sure.
So in 22, it started maybe like August 10th or something like that. And I should put a note, right? Like it's similar to any other sort of climate study, it's like a singular year or even a variability within 30 years doesn't indicate it's a climate, like you can't prove it's exactly climate related, right?
Sure.
Like, so there's always variability in nature. We know that, but there's a lot that backs up that harvest is changing in an unconventional way, the start and end time, and what's happening during harvest across the world. So there's all sorts of studies that show this. So just to go back to our example, like in 22, harvest started early August and basically ended first week of September. I mean, we had stuff to do, fermentations, but like our heaviest hits happened like early to mid-August. Fast forward to harvest 2023, it started exactly on September 1. Okay. Because August 31st, we had like, it was just like magical, right? So we had like a full moon. It's the harvest moon, the blue moon. Okay. And like, we did this like little, I don't know, manifestation thing. We went to the beach under the moon and we like wrote our dreams and stuff down with Lexi, who's Azizam employee number 1.
Nice.
And we were like, okay, cool. Let's like dream up this harvest. And it ended up being 2 months.
Okay.
It didn't end really, I want to say, till, so I was like, I definitely went towards the end of October in Tecate, which is very unusual. So I share that because like, and there's other examples of that. Like in 21, I think we had an early frost that killed, the first budding. From 2020 to last year, there was like, and I think 2 years prior to that, like there was in the time that I have been there, there's been very little rain. Last year was the first year that I experienced like healthy rain season. I think the year before there was like 2 tiny little rain events. Like, so, what are we doing to prepare, right? Like there's all these like producers there that are really fucking awesome, and they do rainwater harvesting. They're playing with making piquettes because they want to like try to be more thoughtful with the secondary products. A lot of people compost with the skins. But it's more like it's an individual situation.
Sure. Yeah.
And even though we have this amazing university in Ensenada and there are climate scientists there doing this work on wine in the region and climate change, they're like part of this national committee and doing really cool work on it. There's still no regional or collective approach that I know of.
Okay.
I could be totally ignorant. That happens often. That's happened to me so many times where I'm like, this doesn't exist in Baja. And then like 4 days later, it's like, oh, we've had this for 28 years. What are you talking about? So as far as I'm aware, there's not a collective approach. A couple years ago, we had National Geographics come and do this article on what's happening in the region in the context of climate change. And, their whole, story headline is sort of some of the things we've been talking about. It's like the way forward for wine is to look backwards, meaning you can have all these technological solutions that a lot of regions have in terms of like protecting against frost or catalyzing rain. But like, what if we look at old varietals like Mission that are durable and reliable in this particular region? They're adapted to this region.
Yeah.
And we move towards that instead of Pinot and Cab Sauv and, all the goodies that people are interested in because of consumer culture, let's say. So, yeah, I don't have a great answer for you. I would just say like what we're doing at Azizam Vici, what we're doing is focusing on these old varietals. And there's just so much more to be done, Yeah, and we can talk about what that could be.
But that's a great start where you're using the material that's already planted and that's surviving, has deep roots, so less water. And like you said, if it's able to survive some of the frosts or like weather events, then a lot less intervention and or toys and gadgets and sprays and everything may be needed. So,
and we don't add chemicals to our vineyards. We don't add like pesticide, all that stuff. So it's sort of there's that element of it too, of course, in natural winemaking, right? And so, but that's sort of a given. It's like we're not adding to the shit, but it's like, how could we be supporting? And really, I guess my dream, like secret dream that I've probably not told many people, it's like, because again, I feel like I'm just stepping into a lot of the stuff. It's like, in my mind, I completely see all the work that we did in New York and other places where you like build a regional committee of scientists and you bring them together and they create the models and then we find a way to share that with the key stakeholders and you socialize it. And so like my dream is to do that. And I've, started talking to some of these climate scientists. One of them's my neighbor. So we have drinks and stuff and she's amazing. And she's like the climate scientist for wine in the region. But like that stuff's hard. It's just hard. The data is not always there. The need is there individually because people are impacted and we're all struggling at different moments in different ways, especially with drought, especially with like smaller yields, especially with getting less access to white grapes, you know. But how do you connect the dots in a very concrete way between these projections and actions, like practical, concrete actions that people can take? And that's always been the crisis in climate adaptation in many ways, right? Because it's like, great, my house is in a flood zone. Perfect. Now I need to have an extra like $40,000 a year for flood insurance. Like, or, oh, I need to like elevate the electrical equipment so that it's not great. Now I need to spend another like $28,000 on that, right?
Right.
So it's like, cool, I need to change my varietals. How do I, like, where do I get the money for that? And, you know,
like
my family heritage isn't connected to it. Like, we've had these vineyards. Some people have had like Nebbiolo or you know, Cab Sauv or whatever, like for 25 years, and they're really proud of it. And like, why the fuck would I uproot this, you know?
Yeah. What can people sort of realistically do?
Yeah.
Like some of it's money or time or
identity.
It's hard to replace 25-year-old Nebbiolo with.
Like Palomino might not be sexy for everyone. Mission is Rosa del Peru is not easy to work with. So you know, it's like, what resources can we offer them besides, like, because that's, again, it's like you're sounding the alarm on like these things. Okay, this is what's going to happen. This isn't going to be sustainable in X years. It's going to really be fucked up. So great, cool. What resources are available? Like, I don't have the labor power to replace, or I can't afford to miss this vintage, or, you know.
Yeah, and especially with the natural wine, I think, you know, you're taking so many of the interventions off the table.
Yeah.
Like there's not, you don't have the tools at your disposal that a more conventional or larger conventional winery might have.
Yeah, you have different tools at your disposal. I don't know if I would say more or less, like I'm thinking of Tom Lube or, you know, other people who are like super into cover crops and biodynamic agriculture, and it's like, oh, we have more, you know, like we have more resources available to us. And I think that's totally true.
That's a better way to look at it.
Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah.
But like, I'm thinking Baja specific, like just to ground our conversation, you know, a lot of the farmers that we work with, wine growers that we work with, are just literally small scale wine growers. They have the land. Like their uncle, I'm thinking of a specific network of people we work with. Like their uncle started it like 30 years ago, and he's sort of like the head honcho. And people are like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like he's making good money. Okay. I used to grow these fruits and that's not paying well. So, okay, I'm going to, like, I know that this is going to pay well. I hear all the buzz. Everyone's like, oh, these grapes are, you know, like, I get paid every year for them. So then they start planting that. And then, like, so one guy has a lot of resources, and then the other guy, the other cousin, actually doesn't. And he just has some wild, you know, vineyards because he got that from his father or whatever, right? And so it's like we work with these like bizarre range of actors, which I think maybe every wine region can say. I'm sure in California it's the same. I'm sure in other regions it's the same. It's like, it's less. So two things. One, it's probably less rich than other regions in certain ways.
Okay.
Because you do have these small scale producers who are just sort of cowboys or rancheros, and they're like doing their thing. They just want to sell their fruit, they want to make money, and they want to get on with it, you know?
Okay.
They care for the vineyard, but they're not like winemakers in that sense, you know?
Right. Wine isn't like a way of life for them.
Like they know about it.
It's a crop.
Yeah. Yeah. They know
sell.
people pay for it. They know what it is. They enjoy it when we give them bottles, but you know, it's not. And then, so like what I'm trying to frame is like, there's those actors that are very informal and small scale rancheros. And then there's like the big conventional wineries, you know, that are, that have decades, if, you know, maybe a century of experience in the region. They actually started the first vineyards. They bought up a lot of the small rancheros, and now
Okay.
it's part of their setup. They have shit tons of money. They have shit tons of resources. They add a bunch of things to their vineyards, and while they are impacted by climate change and they know about it, they, as you're saying, they have different tools and different resources to tackle the more year-to-year challenges of it.
Mm-hmm.
They, not more, but like they have more concrete, immediate result. It's like Clorox versus apple cider vinegar for cleaning up a mess.
Yeah, that's interesting where you said to tackle the year to year of it, because you're not really solving like a bigger issue or anything, but you're able to like fix kind of the things that come up in a growing season.
Totally.
I guess.
Totally. It's like we would say this in disaster resilience, like there's a study, I think it's been updated. It used to be like $1 invested in prevention is worth $4 in terms of post-disaster.
Sure.
And so I think now it's like $6 or $8. But it's essentially like if you spend $1 in preventing XYZ in your vineyard, it's you're saving that much more in the future, because if you have to deal with adding those protection layers like chemically, it costs that much more essentially. And then there's all the secondary impact of it. So
how did you decide to start Azizam Wines?
oh, such a good question. Do we need more wine for this?
We can.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really good. It's still
smoky.
it has that smokiness, yeah.
This is what I mean. Rosa del Peru is sort of hard to work with. And some people love it and some people don't. And it's not clear. Is this Rosa? Is it Mission? I don't know. You know? But there's this like fickle element to it. Do you detect like a little VA?
Touch, but not overwhelming. Or I mean,
It
fits with it. Like it's not distracting or anything. It just sometimes Mission can be like a little low in acid. So if anything, maybe like it doesn't distract from it. It might like balance it a little bit.
No, this wine is so interesting to me because it's like it's been my dream to do a co-ferment field blend, and I love how ordinary and basic it tastes. And then I also love that you can get so deep with it and be like, because this is the thing, everyone's always like porch pounder is chuggable, like that's okay. I enjoy drinking wine easily, like I'm a thirsty hoe like anyone else, but like I like that you can have really basic, ordinary wine that has a lot of depth and history to it and like substance. And so like, to me, this is what I feel like this is. So you could drink this and not think about it, right? And just be like, whatever. And then if it does come up, you're like, yeah, it's a 100-year-old vineyard. Oh yeah, like it was a field blend, like Palomino, Muscatel, Rose. Oh, Rosa del Peru, what's that? Oh, it's like this really rare grape that's not everywhere. Like, so it's not like it's got this like rich history to it, and yet it can be this completely ordinary wine that you don't really overthink. I sort of like wines like that. You know?
They're good, and like you said, you could do a lot with them. Like they pair really well with so many foods, but if you don't feel like thinking about it too much, it doesn't have overwhelming tannin or anything that sort of knocks you back.
And you're totally right. The VA can be a boost. Exactly. Like, cause this, I've had like, these are samples. So it's like, I do want it to have this acidity, but then I think like, first of all, these are samples. And second of all, no, like it's a fucking basic field blend. And that's the old world way of making a light red. Like you can do all these cool tricks, like direct press this, light maceration that. And I'm doing that. But also I like just, that's how you make a light red. You just harvest the field blend.
How much of this is Palomino versus the Mission and
Great question. Great question. I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was basically, we filled up a 600 liter, almost like 500 liter tinaja,
Okay.
concrete amphora we have, and did a carbonic maceration, and we did a cake layer. So it was sort of like Rosa del Peru, Palomino, Mission, and, just sealed it tight for a couple weeks till it got real, like, you use this like saran wrap on top of these beautiful concrete tinajas.
Keep it all sealed up tight.
Yeah, it's like very sophisticated technology. We saran wrap our wines. And, like it bubbles up because it's creating all that gas. And I've been at these wine fairs, I've been describing to people who are, less familiar. It's sort of like, when you have like fruit in a Ziploc bag, and you take it to the library and you forget it's in your backpack, or you leave it in your car and it's like, bloop, it blows up. And it's like, that's the maceration process, right?
Yeah.
It creates some of that gas. And
it's not overly carbonic tasting, though.
no, to me, it just tastes like a nice, simple, light red that has an interesting profile, but not esoteric.
What makes Rosa del Peru tough to work with? And is it like a mission cross? Or is it related to mission somehow? Or?
Yeah, there's people who are experts on this. So, I would by no means consider myself anything of an expert. I've just worked with it over the last 4 or 5 years. And so my understanding is that Rosa del Peru is a hybrid of Mission and Palomino.
Okay.
And so, but different people say different things. And so I think part of why it's a little difficult to work with, I'm not exactly sure, right? Because we have to think about our specific terroir in Tecate and, what that vineyard went through over the last 100 years. Like, we don't know the history exactly.
Sure.
It seems to be well guarded. But we work with 2 or 3 different vineyards in Tecate that have Rosa del Peru, Mission, and some are like right on the edge of the mountain, and it's like it's a fucking tough. It's sort of got this like rugged, extreme desert vibe. And that vineyard seems to suffer with more variability in the Rosa del Peru.
Okay.
Or Mission, I guess, because it's sort of a blend. But like, I think it has something to do with the skins and the way how basically like this year, this is what I'm basing it on. Again, more lived experience, because I think there's a ton of people who've done a lot of research. So I'm mindful of not pretending like I'm an expert by any
lived
measure.
Experience is good though.
Yeah. Like, definitely don't know everything. But I did this experiment this year for Azizam, which I totally avoided your question, but where I wanted to do a direct press with the Rosa del Peru.
Okay.
And I don't exactly know why I wanted to do this, but I thought it'd be really cool because we typically at Beachy make this beautiful red under Santa. It's the Rosa del Peru. And, I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to get a little bit of this from this vineyard. So, like, how can I make it interesting in a different way? And I guess I was I'm really obsessed with these light reds and this old world way of making light reds. So I'm trying to figure out different ways to do that. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll do like light maceration and direct press. And it basically came out like a white, like a crema color, like an eggshell color,
Okay.
And it was tasting so beautiful at the start. I was like, holy shit, I cracked a code. Like,
I did it.
yeah, like, all these people, all these centuries, like, something so silly, right? And then, no, there's a reason why people make reds, like, or leave the skin on. I think it gives it a lot of protection because it went like VA real quick, and like I try to make these different interventions with it where I would like add fresh must, or if I did another press, add some of the skins, and it helped and it gave it some life and structure. But it really was like it was being naughty, I was like, okay, so and it's not a rule, right? Because maybe next harvest it'll be excuse me, different, but I do think there's something about the skin and the protection it gives it, and then like
Sure.
how it interacts with the flesh, that it gives it this fickle element that's very unreliable. Maybe the skin is really thick. I don't know.
Okay. Huh. Yeah. Well, this one turned out really nice. With
Thanks.
it. But now you have to answer how you started the winery.
Yeah. I like let's drink more wine. Okay. I'm going to like circle into it because, because there's like a short answer, and then there's like the longer answer. So I don't know which one is more true.
Okay.
The short answer is, I was making wine at Beachy over the last 4 years, and I wanted to have a little bit more like sway over some experiments and like play differently a little bit, like sort of see my own, because with Beachy, like it's a well-known brand, it's a well-known wine. Some people love it, some people aren't a huge fan, but like it's really put natural wine from Mexico on the map. It's a big deal in that sense,
Yeah, definitely.
We've had like amazing collaborators. I've had an opportunity to like connect with several of them, even though they preceded me. It started with Noel's family, with his mom, with his dad, with his brothers, and then Louis Antoine, who's like an amazing producer from France, but really put the mark down in Chile, and Jan Rohan, who's like an exceptional winemaker from France and Beaujolais, and learning from them and stepping into that really interesting intersection of a like pioneer Mexican winery with the context and support of all these like really brilliant people. And yet, so like having some paths forward with the labels, knowing what wines they typically make, and yet still there were these funky vintages, there were some funky releases, and there's a lot of room to like, I don't know what the right way of putting it is, but it's sort of like rejigging it and like establishing some foundation so that you can keep the wild elements of the wine and the region and the winemaking and like Noel's vision and his family's vision, Yair's vision, Anna's vision, Oscar's vision, the whole family. But that's very different than carving a whole new path.
Yeah.
So like Azizam for me is an opportunity to see, it's literally, this sounds bananas, but it's like literally, I feel like it's like my insides.
Okay.
It's like I never thought I would be able to create so many this is, I guess I'm telling you the longer story. This is not the shorter. I never thought I'd get to like create art like this and create food like this and create policy like this and create like manifest my inner domain and vision and sensibility and palate and curiosity in this way. So it's like I couldn't even fantasize about it. And so it's very different when you step into a structure that even, like I built so many of the foundations for Beachy that we're now really tasting in 22 and 23, and 7 new labels and new operations and new vineyards and just a different approach for the team. And like that, all that stuff really matters and shows up in the winemaking, but it's super different than like being like, I don't know, I want to do a direct press with Rosa del Peru and I think it's pretty dumb, but I'm going to try it. And like, I'm curious. And what if I want to save it because it has all this like funkiness, and this year I want to add skins from this harvest and make it into a pet nat. Like, ooh, it's a Crema Rosa del Peru pet nat. Like probably really dumb and unlikely, but like that creativity and that energy and that curiosity, it's like, holy fuck, like if I die tomorrow, I would be happy. Like, just because I got to experience that side of myself, Yeah. And so it sounds crazy, but it's a little like, it's like that. I think that's sort of probably why it started. And it's also probably in a deep way connected to my family and my heritage. And like, I don't come from a winemaking family, We're from Iran originally, Persian, but from Tabriz, where my parents are from, it's, more Azeri. And, that's sort of the roots, the origins of philosophy and poetry and Rumi and art and, politics. There's a lot of rich history there and really stubborn people and really curious people. And I think, in particular, my dad's family, they're sort of known for their palate. They used to have orchards and almond orchards specifically. And everyone in his, all his brothers, are fucking crazy. They have an insane palate. They're famous for their jams. They make pistachio jam, walnut jam, desserts. I have these memories of my dad who's he wouldn't cook often, but when he did, he would make this Persian dish with carrots and plums. And it's holy fuck. It tasted like my mom would make it and it'd be amazing. And then my dad would make it and it'd be what? How is this the same dish?
Yeah.
And it's there's just a meticulousness in his family and in the palate with, just to give you an example, I remember this trip in Turkey where we were walking late at night in Antalya and we were in this it was I don't know, we'd eaten, we'd walked, and this dude, and he was probably well into his late 60s at this point, maybe early 70s. And he was I was walking slow, whatever. And then all of a sudden, this dude just hangs a heavy right, for no fucking reason. He just disappears into this alley. And we're in these small streets, little cobblestone, very Greek, romantic Mediterranean. He hangs a heavy right. And he's he just sort of disappears. I'm what the fuck? Where'd he go? What's going on? How is this guy moving so fast all of a sudden? And then I see him down this cobble street road in the dark. And he's oh, come here, Maryam, come. I found some figs. Homie smelled figs down the street. What the fuck? What are you up to, bro? It was just sort of funny. And so, I named it Azizam because in Farsi, it means darling or beloved. And it's a term of endearment in a culture that's filled with terms of endearment. And my aunts and my mom, everyone called me that, or call a lot, everyone calls each other that. And it felt like a little bit of a love letter to my dad, my family, that heritage. But yeah, I don't really have a good reason.
Okay. That sounds like a good reason, though. Yeah, it's a great reason. What are some of the wines that you're making?
Ooh, love these questions. They make me so nervous. I immediately want to leave.
Well, you don't have to leave.
I know. I'm okay.
You probably know the wines that you're making. So.
Totally. No, it's the thing that gets you so excited that you want. Does that happen to you?
Yeah.
It happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
It's probably why I tried to sabotage our meeting because I was so excited about it.
Well, you're not the first one I've heard kind of say their wine project kind of started out as as an art project, as a way to express yourself and something you felt you had to get out there. So for some people, it could be drawing or painting or photography.
Yeah.
But for some, it can be winemaking.
Yeah. It truly feels I think I've only told my therapist this or something, but it feels inevitable. And I don't mean it in a ego way or success way. I don't mean it like that. I just mean I don't have a good reason except that I feel, and I'm one of these very indecisive, take a long time to make decisions kind of people. And it's taken me a really long time to transition into this. I've been dreaming of this for 15 years or something, but it feels ancient somehow to me. Okay. It's not even exactly art, and it's more it feels, there's something that feels ancient in it for me. Okay. And I don't mean to say my family has been making wine for generations, but it's there's something that feels meant to be. That sounds so cheesy, but and who knows how it'll unfold itself,
Yeah.
But just to say I often feel a disconnect between my head and my heart in life.
Okay.
And when I'm making wine, when I'm drinking wine, when I'm eating food and wine, when I'm with winemakers, with friends who are like, I feel more lockstep or aligned than I do any other time.
Okay.
And I think that's a funny little signal, you know?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, love to hear though some of the wines.
Great. You're so good at your job.
You're making.
Okay, so 22, I made a little less than 1,000 bottles of 2 cuvées, 1 Nebbiolo pet nat, carbonic pet nat from this beautiful vineyard in Rosarito that is fig trees and apricot trees and pomegranate trees. Rosarito's right by the coast, close to the water, and it's not known for its vineyards. And I had no desire to make a Nebbiolo pet nat.
Okay.
It was like, I wasn't like, ooh, Nebbiolo, old vines. Like,
Yeah.
It was more like, oh, it's really difficult to get good organic grapes. It's incredibly difficult to get regenerative vineyards that are willing to work with new producers. And, and I love their agriculture there. They have a pollination garden.
Oh, wow.
They do a lot of like ecological treatments to different parts of their vineyard, dealing with a lot of fog and mildew. They do a lot of the meats and animals for the restaurants in Baja. They just have all this stuff going on, a lot of fruit trees, and it's like a whole systems vineyard. So I was like, okay, I really fucking love the agriculture. So what can I do to give this wine some freshness? Like I don't want a reductive, like heavy Nebbiolo. And by the way, when I say Nebbiolo, it's like a Mexican Nebbiolo, right? So we don't actually know if it's Nebbiolo. It's probably like a cousin of Nebbiolo.
Okay.
So...
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like, I call it like a Mexican Lambrusco, essentially.
Okay.
And it's named Zaza after my like great-grandmother who, was this fierce, warm, creative source of love in the family. And the other one called Zagros is an orange skin contact. And that one is from 2 different regions in Baja. It's from Tecate, 100-year-old vineyards of Palomino and Muscatel. And Valle de Guadalupe, more coastal, sandy soil, very young vineyards of Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay.
Okay.
Both of them skin contact in concrete tinajas for almost 30 days and then blended together. So that was the 22. In the 23s, because there was rain last year, it was amazing. There were actually grapes.
Yeah, likewise in California.
Right. Because usually you're like 22, we were like, oh God, I hope we get some white grapes. We've got to make some wines. Like Gordayoria needs, like fucking wines. Grapes we're like such low yields. We made barely a tiny amount. This year I made 10,000 bottles.
Wow.
Which is fucking bananas, from 1,000, 10,000, really as a function of the agriculture, the access to grapes. And so I'd been like sort of exploring these vineyards the last few years, and I sort of got to pull in some of the connections.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
The one we're drinking, the co-ferment, which is this field blend of Palomino, Rosa del Peru Mission, from a 100-year-old vineyard in Tecate. It's like sort of the front garden part. And it was a dream of mine since I visited Penedès in 2017 or 18 and saw how they were just like harvesting from the same field the same day, putting it all together, didn't think too much about it. And it, like we were saying earlier, it's like the old world way of making a red.
Yeah.
And a couple of other experiments with Nebbiolo, not pet nat, a light macerated Mission from Valle de Gruya that's more like an orange rosé. And then another iteration of Zagros, but this time with Sauvignon Blanc and Garnacha Blanca and Muscatel.
Okay.
So those are the upcoming.
The orange wines, you're fermenting those all separately and then blending after, or?
I'm trying to, but because I'm, on a baby tiny budget,
Yeah.
I'm now filling whatever vessels I have.
Okay.
But I tried to do the Sauvignon Blanc is separate and the Garnacha Blanca is mostly separate. We had to blend it with a little bit of the Muscatel. The Muscatel is actually from a new region, Ojos Negros.
Okay.
That
Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, it's sort of up and coming, I guess, in the sense that it used to be more dairy lands.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the dairy farmers started not being able to compete with a more national dairy producer and seeing that like grapes are a better return on investment, I guess you want to say, getting better price points.
Yeah.
They decided a lot of them just started selling and making them into vineyards over the last couple decades.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that because it's a whole other soil type and a whole other region.
Mm-hmm. Is there a variety or terroir or a place that you really want to work with that you haven't yet?
In Baja?
Yeah. I mean, if you have somewhere in mind that it's somewhere else, that's okay too.
Yeah. Somewhere else, I would love to work in some sort of volcanic island context, just to that have these same varietals or similar varietals, just to see them in a different context.
Okay. Canary Islands or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Even Chile, I would love to do a harvest again there. But in Baja, I'm pretty obsessed with aromatic whites.
Okay.
I would love to see if something like Malvasia, how it would do in that region. That's something like I think there's a lot of like rich Italian varietals that do well with heat. In terms of the whites that could do well there. And, because, there's a lot of Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. And I don't know. I mean, they do okay. They do well. But I think like Palomino inspires me and Muscatel. Like those are like rich aromatic whites that are, can be kind of like Palomino can be sort of boring if, but it does so well with the skin contact and the oxidation. And
yeah.
I would love to see, how that worked. But also just continuing to learn from... I have so much to learn. Every time I talk about this stuff, I'm like, God, I'm so like uneducated about this work in a way because it's like there's just so much history about these grapes in this region and the soil. And it's sort of endless. Mm-hmm.
It's been a wine region for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, 400 years or so.
The region I think you're thinking of is further south. It's like Barre, and I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's been around for about 500 years.
Okay.
It depends how you count Baja's wine region.
Okay.
We know Santo Tomas has been around for at least 100 years, so more than that maybe, and so at least that amount.
Okay.
But it's interesting, like talking to other farm growers in that region. It's like how you think about wine. Like we were talking to someone in Guadalupe whose family has had these vineyards for at least 70 years. And he was telling us about his family history and how his like great uncle was like this British pirate who came from like the south of Baja. And there were these like somehow connected with these Russians, the same Russians that went on to do like Russian River and
Fort Ross and stuff like
that. Yeah. And it was just so funny because he was talking about how it wasn't until like even he was saying his dad. So this guy was like well into his late 70s, maybe in his 80s. He was saying basically he was the first to do in his family like to do like vessels, like aging vessels.
Oh.
Something like that,
Okay.
Because we were talking about in the context of like Iran. He was like, "Oh, you're from Iran. Like they've been doing this shit forever, like 5,000 years." And I was like, "Whoa, how'd you know?" He's like, "Well, I really got like versed into like preservation and vessels and all this stuff." And like it was just sort of interesting. Like, he was really bringing to the forefront in many ways about how it depends how you think about winemaking. There's like the fresh winemaking, you know, you let it ferment, you get alcohol, you drink it. And then there's like not just aging from like a super fancy place, but like preserving, you know?
Yeah.
And even some of that is quite new in the region.
I mean, somewhat recent around here. I mean,
Totally.
less than 200 years,
Yeah.
for really preserving it. And
Yeah, I wonder who started preserving it in California. Like, do we know who started the aging preserving?
I mean, the missions used barrels,
Right.
but then I think they kind of dropped out of use a little bit as like when the missions disbanded, it kind of almost got more wild again because that infrastructure was kind of gone of like the missions controlling the land. I don't know exactly, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. I'm telling you, every time we talk about this stuff, I'm like, God, I'm so fucking educated. I have so much to learn.
There's always more.
There's always more.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people get your wines or follow Azizam to track down new wines? Or are they in stores locally or
Yeah.
soon will be?
So probably the best place is like if you just want to learn more, you could find me on Instagram because for the first time in my life, I created Instagram when I started Azizam. So it's AZIZAM Wines on Instagram. And
Was there anything else you wanted to add or anything?
I would just say I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much for like connecting with me and being curious about what we're up to in this region and what I'm up to as Azizam, and just being really like patient and kind as I figured out our schedule. And
Thanks. I'm glad we could make it work.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just
that's great.
I felt really it felt really lovely that someone was this interested in hearing about this region. So I
good.
really appreciate it.
I'm glad to hear that. Thanks. That's
Yeah.
very nice. Glad we could make it work by the skin
Yeah.
of our teeth.
Yeah.
We made it.
And it's
the last
sort of,
minute.
but it looks like we literally couldn't have planned it better.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Maryam. She has a lot of amazing insight into what vineyards, wine, and the world are facing with climate change and ways we can all work together to lessen its impact. The vineyard and winemaking work for Azizam reflect these values of working with the climate. You can follow her at azizamwines.com, that's AZIZAM wines.com, or Azizam Wines on Instagram. You can follow the podcast on wherever you're listening and the Instagram at Indie Wine Podcast. Feel free to email indiewinepodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or feedback. If you can tell your wine friends about the podcast too and help spread the word, I'd really appreciate it. Rating or subscribing helps too. There's also a Patreon if you choose to support the podcast monetarily, to allow for more episodes and to help defray other costs like gas money and research book purchases. Any amount is appreciated. I have a small token of my appreciation to send you also if you do. The link is in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode. Have a good one.